Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monique. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And to all my subscribers, thanks for all the support. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make this elegant wrap dress with front side panel. So let's get started. I'll be using 3 yards of crepe fabric for these tutorials. And these are the tools needed for the pattern drafting. I'll be using pattern paper for clarity. The full length is 42 inches and I added 2 inches for seam allowance. Here is the front and the back. This is the zipper allowance. I used 1 inch for the zipper allowance. I used the biggest part of the bodice, which is the hips, and I divided it by 4 plus 2 inches to draft the pattern. The first measurement I'll be taking is the shoulder weight, which is 15 inches. 15 divided by 2 will give us 7.5. I'm adding half an inch for seam allowance. So from the seam allowance, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then the next measurement I'll take is the neck width. I'm using 4 inches for the neck width. Then from this 1 inch I came down with for the shoulder slope, I'll connect it to the neck width like this. Then I'll take the chest line from that shoulder slope. I'll take 8 inches for the chest line, then I'll connect it horizontally. After doing that, every other measurement will start from this line. So I'll take the shoulder to bust points, and her measurement is 11 inches, so I'll connect it this way. Then the next measurement I'll take is the shoulder to waist. Our waist is 17 inches. I'll also connect it this way. Then I'll take the shoulder to hip. Her hips is 26 inches and I'll also connect it like so. I've already taken the shoulder to full length. Now I'll take the shoulder width on the chest line, which is 8 inches. Then I'll take a straight line from the chest line to the shoulder like this. So now we're done with the front. I'll go straight to the back panel. I'll start taking my measurement from this zipper line. I'll take the shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. Then I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then I'll take the 4 inches for the neck width and connect it straight to meet the shoulder like this. Then I'll take the chest line, same thing as the front. I'll take the 8 inches and I'll connect it horizontally. Then from this line, I'll take the back half length, which is 16 inches. Then I'll connect it horizontally. After doing that, I'll take the shoulder to hip, which is the same thing as the front. I'll connect it straight to meet the front panel. Then I'll take the shoulder width on the chest line like we did for the front. Then I'll connect it with a straight line. After doing that, I'll get the center point, that's the midpoint of this line, and the midpoint is 4 inches. Then I'll come in by half an inch. Then I'll take a straight line to meet this point. Now I'll be taking the bust circumference. The bust circumference for this measurement is 38. 38 divided by 4 will give us 9.5. I'm adding 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Then I'll connect it with my armhole curve like this. That's my armhole. Then I'll go to the front and repeat the same thing. I'll get the center point of this line and I'll come in by 0.75. Remember, on the back we came in by 0.5. Then I'll also take the bust circumference, which is 9.5. I'm adding 1.5 inches for seam allowance. So I'll use my armhole curve to connect it like this. Now I'll be taking the bust span measurements, and for this the bust span is 8 inches. 8 inches divided by 2 will give us 4 inches. I'm adding half an inch for seam allowance. That's 4.5 inches. I'm taking it on the bust point, on the waist, and on the hip point. So I'll come up by 2 inches from the hip point. Then I'll take a straight line to meet the hip point like this. Now I'll be imputing the dart on this line. I'll take half inch on both sides. That's on the waistline. Then I'll come down by 1 inch from the bust point. Then from the waistline, I'll connect it to the bust point, and from the waistline also I'll connect it to the hip point like this. We've already taken the bust circumference. The next measurement I'll take is the waist circumference, and for this the waist is 31. 31 divided by 4 will give us 7.5. I'll replace this 1 inch for that and I'll add extra 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Then on the hip is 41. 41 divided by 4 will give us 10.25. So I'll take the 10.25 and I'll add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Now on the full length, I'll use the exact hip measurement on the full length. I won't be adding seam allowance, and the exact hip measurement is 10.25. So I won't add seam allowance because it's a pencil dress. So I'll connect the measurement like this from the bust to the waist, and from the waist to the hip, and from the hip to the full length. So I'm trying to shape it not to have sharp edge. Now we are done with the front panel. We'll go straight to the back. To get the back dart on the chest line, I'll take the bust span divided by 2, which is 8 inches. Then I'm adding 1 inch for seam allowance. Remember, on the front we added half an inch, but for the back I am adding 1 inch. So from the chest line, I'll come down by 2 inches. Then I'll take the bust span on the waist and also on the hips. So I'll come up by 3 inches from the hip line. Then I'll take a straight line. After doing this, I'll take ½ inch on both sides on the waist. Then I'll connect it to this point. So now that we've achieved our darts, I've already taken the bust circumference, so I'll just go ahead and take the waist circumference, which is 7.5. I'm replacing the darts. Then I'm taking 1.5 inches for seam allowance. The hip is 10.25. I'm taking 1.5 for seam allowance. And the full length, I'm using the exact hip measurement. So I'll just go ahead and connect the lines, just like we did for the front. So I've added all the necessary seam allowance. I don't need to add it when I'm drafting it on the fabric. Now on the back half length, I'll come in by 0.75 to avoid zip bulge. Then from this point, I'll connect it outside the 1 inch like this. Then from this same point, I'll connect it directly outside the hip line here. Then from this hip line, I'll connect it inside the 1 inch like this, so that it will give the back a good fit. Now the next measurement I'll be taking is the front side dart. That is the difference between the back waist and the front waist, and the difference is 1 inch. The back is 16 and the front is 17. So I'll place it on this side and I'll connect it to the bust point. So I'm making an armhole princess dress. So I'll get the midpoint of the armhole here. Then I'll come out by 1 inch. Then I'll connect it to this 1 inch like this. Then I'll reshape the armhole. Now we'll be taking our neck depth. Remember, I've taken our neck width, which is 4 inches. So I'll come down by 2 inches for the back neck depth. Then I'll connect it to the neck width like this. Now after doing that, the dress is going to have a band. So to achieve that, from the waist here, I'll come up by 1.5 inches. I want the band to be 1.5 inches. So I'll do the same thing on the front. So it will have a band. Now we'll be cutting out our pattern. So this is the back and this is the front. So I'll cut this out. Then I'll open it up to draft the front neckline. So on the waist dart, on this side dart leg, I'll come up by 3 inches like this. So from the neck width, I'll just connect it like this to meet these 3 inches. Remember, I said from the waist dart here, that's the dart leg, I came up by 3 inches. So I'll just use my pattern ruler to connect it like this. I'm using my hip ruler. Then I'll take a straight line to meet the dart leg like this. So this will be our neckline. Okay, so now this is the style. Won't be using this side of the top. Then I'll come down to the skirt on the center line here. On the center point here, I'll come in by 4 inches. Then from this dart leg, I'll take a straight line to meet this 4 inches like this. I'm using my hip curve ruler to get a proper shape. So I'm trying to reshape it. So this will be the style. So I'll just go ahead and cut it from the waistline here. So I'll take another pattern paper and I'll place the front skirt panel on it. Then I'll use my tracing wheel to trace this style. Then I'll cut it out. I'm not touching the real panel, that's the skirt panel. I'll just I only traced it out and I'll cut it out. So I'll be placing it on the front skirt panel like this. So we'll have something like this on the dress. So I'll keep this aside. Now on the top, I'm thinking of adding a facing on the dress. I'll be taking 4 inches. I've not really decided yet. I might change my mind. So if I'm going to add a facing, it will be something like this. But for now, let's leave that aside and cut this out. The facing may not be necessary. I'll be closing the side dart, but before then, on the back panel, I'll separate the top from the skirt like this. Remember I said it's going to have a band. I'll cut this out later. So the front and the back panel are not equal. The front is 17 inches while the back is 16 inches. So when I check it, as you can see, the back is shorter than the front. So what I'll do is to close the side darts. But to do that, I'll open the center of the waist like this, the center dart. Then I'll close the side dart this way and transfer the side dart to the waist. So I'll tape it with my masking tape. So we'll have something like this. So when I place the back and the front panel together, you see that, as you can see, it's equal. So now the next thing I'll do is to cut it out. So I'll cut through the line. So we are going to have 4 panels. So we are cutting 2 of this and this. So I'll go ahead and trim out this excess dart. So it will be like this. So I'm trying to tape it so that I'll cut out the band. Remember I measured 1.5 inches for the band. So the band is going to be on a fold. So I'll cut it on a fold. Then I'll also close, but before then I'll just cut it out, the band for the back like this. Then I'll close the dart. So I'll tape it. I'll be cutting 4 of this. Now I've transferred the pattern paper on the fabric. The fabric is on a fold. I'm using the stretchy part on a fold. So this is the pattern paper. I'm cutting it exactly like this because I've already added all the necessary seam allowance on the pattern when I was drafting it. So I'll be adding 1/4 inch on the side here because I've decided to cut out 4 panels. One will serve as the lining. I'm not using facing anymore. So I'll cut it by adding 1/4 inch, and on the shoulder I'm going to add 1/2 inch for joining. Then on the waist also I'm going to add 1/2 inch. That's the only allowance I'm adding, 1/2 inch for joining. And on these two I'm adding 1/2 inch on the waist. So I'm done cutting it out. So I also cut out facing for the back panel, and I added interfacing, that's hairstay, to it. Then on the front I cut out 4 pieces. I told you I'm using 1 for lining. So I cut out 4 pieces on the side, and also on the center I cut out 4 pieces. So I'm using the fabric as the lining. Now on the front band I cut it on a fold. I added interfacing to it. I cut out 2. I'm going to turn it in with one of the bands. And on the back band I added 1/4 inch. I did the same thing for the front, I forgot to mention. So I also added interfacing. I cut out 4 of this. Then this is the front skirt. I cut out the front and the back skirt. This is the side panel. I cut out 2 of this. So one will serve as the lining. I'll use it to turn it so you understand when I'm sewing it later. So now let's go back to the top. So to join it, what I'll do is I'll place the side here, and this is the center. So the right side will face the right side. So I'll pin it up. So I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. So I'll do the same thing for the other side. Right side facing right side. So it will be like this. It will lap each other like this. So I'll join the other side that will serve as the lining. So we'll have something like this when we join it. One will be the lining. Then on the back I'll sew the dart. I've already notched where the dart is, so I'll hold it here and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'll take it to the sewing machine and I'll show you when I'm done. So guys, I've joined it by 1/2 inch and I also ironed it. So this is the 2 sides, and this other side will serve as the lining. So I added interfacing to it on this part of it, so that when we join it, it will sit properly. So I'll be joining it together, right side facing right side. So I'll sew it here by 1/4 inch. So before then, I'll just go ahead and pin it up. So I'll sew it by 1/4 inch. So when I turn it to the good side like this, we'll have one panel like so. So I'll do the same thing on this other side. I'll join it here by 1/4 inch. So on the back, I've already joined the darts and I also ironed it. I joined it by 1/2 inch. So guys, I've stitched the front panel. So this was where I stitched. So these are the 2 panels now. So what I'll do is I will make sure one of the panel is overlapping the other, and I'll make sure this part of the dress is on the dart, as on the dart line. So make sure it's properly placed. Then I'll top stitch on top of it here. Then I'll sew it by 1/4 inch. So this is the band. So what I'll do is to get the center of the band and the center of the top. Then I'll place it here. Then I'll pin it up. Remember, you have to top stitch it before placing the band so that it will sit well. So I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. And I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll place the band here. Then I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'll take it to the machine and I'll show you when I'm done. So guys, I've fixed the top. I've fixed the band on the top. And I've also fixed the band on the back top. Now on the front skirt, this is the front skirt, I'll be sewing the darts. I've already notched where the dart is. So I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So we'll have something like this when we sew it. Then I'll place the side panel on top of it like this. So remember, I cut out two of the panel, so I'll use one to turn it. But before then, I'm going to sew the dart also. I'm going to sew the 2 panel on this side together. That's right side facing each other. So I'll sew it from here to the end. So I've pinned it up. I'll take it to the machine and I'll show you when I'm done. So guys, I've stitched the front darts and also this side panel. I stitched the darts together, and also on the sides I hemmed the full length by 1 inch and I added hemming gum so that it will sit properly. So this is the part I stitched. I also ironed it. So I'll place the side panel on the front skirt like this. I forgot to mention, I've also added that to the back skirt. This is the other side. So now I'll be joining the top to the skirt. But before then, I'm going to top stitch this together. That is the side panel and the skirt before joining the top. Then I'll place it this way. So I'm going to pin it up and I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. So I'll sew it here by 1/2 inch. So we'll have something like this, but I'll make sure this part is on the darts here, so that it will align with the top. Then on the back, that's the back top, I'm going to join it with the back skirt also. So I'll pin it up, right side facing right side. So we'll have something like this. I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. I'll do the same thing for the other side, and when I'm done, I'll show you. So guys, we are done. As you can see, the overlap top is aligning with the side panel, and I also gave it a good press. So now I'll be fixing the zip for the back. So this is the zip I'll be using. So I'll turn it right side facing right side before fixing the zip. Then I'll just measure the zip and I'll know where it will stop. So I want the zip to stop here. I'll start sewing it from this point. This is where the zip will stop. So I'll start sewing it by 1 inch. Then I'll pin it up. So I want it to have a slit, so I'm taking about 10 inches for the slit. So that part will be open. So I'll turn it over and I'll go and fix the zip. And when I'm done, I'll show you. So guys, I've fixed the zip. Please make sure this side is aligning when you are fixing your zip. It's very important. So now I'll open the zip. I want to fix the facing. Remember, I've already cut out the facing and I've added interfacing to it. So I'll start sewing it from this point here. I'll be sewing it by 1/4 inch. So I'll pin it up. I'll do the same thing for the other side. After I sew this side, I'll also sew this part where the zip is. So I'll sew very close to the stitched part so that the facing will be together with the dress. Like this. Then after I sew it, I'll do the same thing for the other side. I'll sew it very close to the stitch. Then I'll turn it to the good side like this. So let's assume we've sewn it. I'll just zip it up. Then I'll join the front and back shoulder together. So like I normally do, I'll open it up this way. This is the stitched part. I'll make sure it's aligning here on the shoulder. Then I'll pin it up. I'll sew it by 1/2 inch and I'll do the same thing for the other side. So guys, I've joined the shoulder, as you can see, by 1/2 inch. So now I'll be fixing the second band on the back panel. So what I'll do is I'll open it up. So I'll have something like this. I'll place it here and I'll make sure I'm sewing very close to this stitched part. Let me pin it up. After doing that, after sewing this part, I'll place it here like this. Then I'll pick this side of the top, this first band, and I'll sew where this first stitch is. I'll sew very close to the stitch. I'll sew it together here. So let me pin it up. So when I sew it, I'll pull it out like this. It will look like this. Then I'll join this other side together. That's this band on the skirt part. I'll join it together. Then I'll make sure I sew on top of the stitch again. So I'll do the same thing for the front. Before fixing the band, I'm going to leave 1.5 inches for side seam allowance. So I'll start fixing it from this point here. That's this first band here. So we left 1.5 inches for side seam allowance that will be joining the front and the back together. So I'll pin it up. So I'll sew on top of the first stitch. That's the first band. Then after doing that, I'll turn it over and sew on the second band where the skirt is attached to. So I'll sew on this stitch here, on the top stitch. So I'll do that and show you. So I left 1.5 inches here for side seam, because I'll be joining the front and the back together. Then I'll be joining this band, the front band and the back band separately. I've also joined the front band. So this is the wrong side. I'll be weaving this part of the dress, this part of the band. I'll be weaving it. So now I'll join the front and the back together. on the side here. Remember, we left 1.5 inches. So on this part that is open, I won't join it with the dress. I'll join it separately. So I'll just fold this part out like this. Then I'll make sure these two sides are aligned. Then I'll join it by 1.5 inches that I left for seam allowance to the end. I'll do the same thing on the other side and I'll show you when I'm done. So I've joined it. I've joined the side seam. That's the front and the back together. So as you can see, I left this part out. I didn't join the band. So I've also joined this other side. So now I'll be joining the band separately, this second band. So I'll turn it over like this, right side facing right side. Then I'll sew it by 1.5 inches. So I'm just trying to pin it up. When we turn it, we'll have something like this here. So I'll do the same thing on the other side, right side facing right side. And I'll join it by 1.5 inches. So I'm trying to pin it up. So I'll cut out the excess. We'll have something like this. So on this part, I'll be weaving here so that it will look neat since there's no lining on it. Then now on the full length, I'm going to hem the full length by 2 inches. So I'll fold it by half an inch. Then I'll refold it by 1.5 inches. And I'll make sure it tallies with this side panel. Remember, we've already hemmed the side panel. So I'll be sewing it here. I'll fold it this way and I'll sew it all round. And I'll show you when I'm done. So I've stitched the full length. So as you can see, it's equal with the side panel. Then on the back slit, I stitched it by 1 inch. So I folded it a little before double folding it so that it will look neat inside. So this was where I stitched. So as you can see on the right side, I stitched it and I crossed it over to the other side. So now I'll be fixing the sleeve. So this is the basic sleeve. This is the front and the back. So I'm going to open it up. So this is the cap height. This line is the cap height. So to achieve the puff sleeve, I'm going to alter this sleeve. So from the cap height, I'm going to come down by 5 inches. You can come down by 4 or 5 inches. But for this, I'll come down by 5 inches. Then I'll draw a straight line. Then on the center line of this, that's the crease line, the center line, I'll come up by 2 inches. So let me just rule out the center line so that I will understand what I'm doing. So remember, on these 5 inches, I came up by 2 inches. So from these 2 inches, I'll make like a triangle shape to the end of these 5 inches here. Like this. I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'll cut through the line here. So I'll start cutting it from here, then I'll turn it over to this other point. Then I'll turn it to the other side and I'll stop here. Now I'll be placing it on the fabric. And I'll trace it out. So I've secured it with a pin. It depends on how wide you want it to be. You can open it more than this. It all depends on you. But for this, I'm okay with what I have. So I'm going to trace the cap height like this. So I've already added seam allowance, so I'm going to cut it exactly like this. So I'll be cutting 2 of the sleeve. So here we have it. So on this side, this is the front side of the sleeve. So I'll be gathering this side for the puff sleeve. I'm going to sew a loose stitch. I'll do that and I'll show you. So I've gathered it by making a loose stitch, as you can see. So I'm going to sew this side by 1 inch for the side seam allowance. Then I'm going to measure the armhole of the dress. I'm going to measure the armhole round. So I have about 18 inches. So I'm going to measure what I have here, and I'll make sure I have about 20 inches because of the side seam allowance. So I'm going to open it a little. After doing that, I'll join the side seams. After joining the side seam, I'll fix it to the dress here. Before fixing the sleeve, I'm going to hem the full length by 2 inches. So I'll fold it by 1 inch and I'll refold it again. Then I'll sew the side seam and I'll join it and show you. Now we are done with the dress. So I've fixed the sleeve. So this is the outcome of the puff sleeve. Now the last thing I'll be doing is to fix these buttons. I'm fixing 4 of it. I'll fix one here and I'll fix the other one on top of these points here. So the buttons are for fancy, just to complement the dress. We've come to the end of these tutorials. I hope it was helpful. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, like and share. Thank you.